Thanks for being here, and I'd like to start right in. So, what makes a successful church service? What is success? We always are striving for some kind of a success. We're always striving for some kind of a goal in our life. What's a successful day? What's a successful business? What's a successful marriage? What is a successful church service? And I've always felt like this is the bar. This is the standard here. This verse or this setting here is the standard of what a successful church service is. I'm going to read it here in 1 Corinthians 14, 24 through 25. But if all prophesy, and an unbeliever or an ungifted man enters, he is convicted by all. He is called account by all. The secrets of his hearts are disclosed, and so he will fall on his face and worship God, declaring that God is certainly among you. I think this is a picture of a successful church service. And you might say, well, and I think there's elements to this. You might say, well, I am probably, as a person sitting here in the pew, it's probably on me. Maybe I'm not prepared. This is not what this verse is saying. This is saying an unbeliever or an ungifted man. That is not bearing the responsibility on the hearer necessarily. The responsibility is on the ones that are giving part in the service. So I wouldn't put undue guilt on yourself if somehow in a church service the Lord doesn't maybe reach you. Yes, I think there can be that. I don't want to leave that door shut. But if you sit through church service after church service after church service, and the Lord isn't somehow reaching your heart or speaking to you, we have to just be honest and acknowledge and say the fault lies with the people who are running the service. And I'm not pointing any fingers, but I'm just trying to bring truth to the situation. And I'm not trying to bring judgment on that you point fingers. But if that's the case here, or wherever you go, I guess what I'm saying is let's be a part of the solution. Let's bring it to, if some of you are not being affected by our services, please come and talk to Mike, myself, or one of the deacons. And just say, the service somehow is not stirring me. The burden of that lays on us, the ones who are giving part in the church service. And I guess why I say this is the success in a church service is not that the message is preached perfectly, not that our oratory skills are perfect, not that we form the words correctly, not that we hit every note perfectly in the music team. I really appreciate it when they do hit the notes well. But it's not what makes the service. It's not our surroundings. It's not whether the sun is shining or not. It's whether and it's like when Jesus was walking with his disciples. And they were walking on that road to Emmaus. It says their hearts burned within them. Why? Because they were with Jesus. There was something of a presence of God in their hearts. So now if the responsibility of in the church service rests on us who are giving part in the service to reach the hearts of an unbeliever or an ungifted man, if the burden of that bears on us, if you will, whose burden does it bear on in your own life every day to have this same effect, where you go through a day and at some point in the day you sense a connection with God. You sense where the secrets of your heart are disclosed and you fall on your face and you worship God. Who bears that responsibility? I think it's safe to say that the responsibility is on each individual to have that daily experience of the fire of God, the presence of God coming down and meeting us. And I've been, the last couple times that we've been preaching, I've been talking about this thing of diminishing returns. You know how when we seek for things in the world, and it fills our hearts, and all of a sudden it starts fading, and then eventually it actually goes the other way. Where if we're looking to enjoy those things, and we're looking for that enjoyment to come back to us, it comes back to us in emptiness. And when we're looking at God, then those things actually come back as enjoyment to us. And we read that verse where it says, instruct those who are rich to not trust in uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. So I guess I say all of these things to say, we know that doesn't satisfy. We know that doesn't bring the presence of God. We know in the end that will fail. We all know that. But I am super interested in my own life right now because I'm being kind of candid here, maybe to my own, I don't know, maybe you'll think less of me. But I really feel like I've backslidden from seeing the presence of God daily, in my daily life, reaching out where the fire of God comes down, like in that service, where it says that the secrets of our hearts are disclosed, where we fall down and we worship the Lord, where there is a burden that comes on our heart, or there's a clearing of our heart, or there's something something changes of our discouragement, or whatever it is. And I think we bear the responsibility then of our daily walk to set the stage for welcoming God in our life. And the question I've been asking myself is, how do I welcome the presence of God in my life? What makes him come and be in that church service? What makes him come and meet in me every day? What makes the fire of God come down on a sacrifice or an altar? What better example would there be in the Old Testament of that? Maybe. And the one I'd like to start out of, and I'd like to be thinking maybe in some of my messages now about the presence of God. The presence of God in our life. There is nothing more important than the presence of God in our life. A felt presence of God. And you can say, well, Christian life isn't about feeling. Yes, you're right. There are some things that we're going to read here that will bear that out. But there is feeling. If you don't sense the presence of God in your daily life, I think we need to just acknowledge that we've backslidden, maybe from where we were, and we need to seek that out. And how does that look like? So we'll go to 1 Kings 18, and you can go to your Bibles if you wish. If not, you can follow along on the screen. And we're just going to read about this happening that happened to Elijah and Ahab. I'm just going to read through here, and then we're going to swing back and we're going to walk through some of it step by step and see maybe how we can welcome the presence of God in our life on a daily basis. 1 Kings starting in 18 verse 20. So Ahab sent a message among all the sons of Israel and brought the prophets together at Mount Carmel. Elijah came near to all the people and said, "How long will you hesitate between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him." But the people did not answer him a word. Then Elijah said to the people, "I alone am left prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Now let them give us 2 oxen, and let them choose 1 ox for themselves, and cut it up, and place it on the wood, but put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other ox, and lay it on the wood, and I will not put a fire under it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. And the God who answers by fire, he is God. And all the people said, that is a good idea. So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose 1 ox. I think we went through that one. Oh, no, we didn't. So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose 1 ox for yourselves and prepare it. First, for you are many, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. Then they took the ox which was given them, and they prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, answer us. But there was no voice, and no one answered. And they leaped about the altar which they had made. And it came about at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, call out with a loud voice, for he is a god. Either he is occupied or going aside, or is on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and needs to be awake. So they cried with a loud voice and cut themselves according to their custom with swords and lances until the blood gushed out on them. When midday was past, they raved until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice. But there was no voice, no one answered, and no one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. So all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. And Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel shall be your name. So with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he made a trench around the altar, large enough to hold 2 measures of seed. Then he arranged the wood and cut the ox in pieces and laid it on the wood. And he said, fill 4 pitchers with the water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood. And he said, do it a 2nd time. And they did it a 2nd time. And he said, do it a 3rd time. And they did it a 3rd time. The water flowed around the altar and also filled the trench with water. At the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet came near and said, O Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, that these people may know that you are Lord, our God, and that you have turned their heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. Then all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. Then Elijah said to them, seize the prophet of Baal, and do not let one of them escape. So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and slew them there. Now Elijah said to Ahab, go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of a roar of a heavy shower. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, but Elijah went up to the top of Carmel. And he crouched down on the earth and put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, go up now, look towards the sea. So he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go back 7 times. And about at the 7th time he said, behold, a cloud as small as a man's hand is coming up from the sea. And he said, go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, so that the heavy shower does not stop you. In a little while, the sky grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy shower. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. Then the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and outran Ahab to Jezreel. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Heavenly Father, we look to you this morning And we just ask, as we look at this story and we think about what we're reading, I just pray, Lord, that your presence would be here and would be felt, and that it would change our life, and it would give us hope that we could meet you on a daily basis. This I pray in the name of Jesus. Amen. So I think it's important to get the context of this story. The context is in 1 Kings 16, 29, 34, chapters before this all started. So Ahab was the son of Omri. And Omri had become the king of Israel in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, and Ahab the son of Omri reigned over Israel of Samaria 22 years. And Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord, more than all who were before him. It's like a line of kings, and it's like every time it says, this one was worse than all the ones that were before him. This one was worse than all the ones that were before him. This one was worse than all the ones that were before him. And it came down to Ahab. And it came about as though it had been a trivial thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he married Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbal, king of Sidonians, and went to serve Baal and worshipped him. So he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. Ahab also made the Asherah. Thus Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel than all the kings of Israel who were before him. Again, he did more, he did worse than all the kings. But what did he do? He went and married Jezebel, and he set up an idol to the house of Baal and set up Asherah. Now, again, I'm going to take you a little bit back to, remember we talked about all the things that we do to find fulfillment and joy in life, and in the end they disappoint us. It's very interesting when you look at what Baal stands for and what Asherah stands for. The god of Baal, specifically, if you look it up in the dictionary, it's the god of fertility and also the god of rain and dew. Let that soak in. This is who he went to set up. He set up a god of fertility that also was in charge of rain and dew. The Asherah is basically a female version of Baal. And I'm using my imagination here, but I almost think Jezebel was like, hey, I want Asherah. Just because it was kind of a female version of the Baal god. But it's very interesting. Think about it. The very thing that brought dryness to the land was that he set up a god of rain. It was the very thing that he set up. And it's in Elijah went to Tishbite, who was of the settlers of Gilead, said to Ahab earlier, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand, surely there shall be neither dew nor rain these years except by my word. And you look it up in the dictionary, this is a God of dew and rain. So the very thing that they set up for that success was the very thing that they failed in with the 450 prophets of Baal. So the very things that we set up in our life to bring us some kind of satisfaction and some kind of joy and some kind of fulfillment are the very things that will bring us in the end dryness. That's what brought dryness to the land. So now, because we see that, again, I'm kind of moving away from those messages of what the things you set up, how they affect you. We all know that now. They will in the end affect dryness, and they will disappoint you. So now let's kind of go into a little bit more of a series we're thinking of. Again, we were thinking of a successful church service, but then let's think of a successful day in our life. And what better than to have the presence of God with you when you go day by day? And this is an example in Scripture. We can learn from examples. There might be portions of here that might really speak to you and apply to you. Others might not. Just as we go through them, see what the Lord is saying to you, and maybe one will stand out, or maybe all of them. I don't know. Of maybe, I don't know if you'd call it a pattern, but something that you can maybe see that, maybe that's something I need to look at for the presence, to welcome the presence of God in my heart on a daily basis. So one of the first things that, we look at, and that is there's a promise of rain. We need to believe in the promise of God. We need to look away from our own devices, our own veils that we've set up to bring rain in our life. We need to look away from that. And then we look at the promise of God. Are you looking at the promises of God in your life? It says in chapter 18, verse 1, "Now it happened after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, Go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the face of the earth." It was a promise. That was what moved, that was his first movement. Before, it was an acknowledgement of, you're not going to have any rain. That was like his prophecy. The next really movement of where Elijah went back to Ahab, from my memory at least, is when the promise came. So, fill yourself with the promises of God's word. Look in his word about mercy, about being bold, and all of those promises. Look at the promises of God. This is where it starts. Is there a promise? Did the Lord speak to your heart? We live by every word that the Lord speaks to our heart. Has the Lord spoken into your life a promise that you've forgotten, or that you're not standing on anymore, or that you've kind of put on the shelf? Just remember, the last time the Lord gave you a promise, it might be good for you to make a list of promises that he's given you, that he's specifically given you personally. Write those down again. It starts with the promise. At some point, we need to make a decision, and we need to say, are we relying on idols or the world, or are we relying on God? So now I see the promise. I see that it's written there. Am I now going to rely on the promise itself, or are we going to rely on the things that we've become accustomed to and the things that are easy in life, as far as like this idol? You notice the idol never spoke to them. Well, that's also the benefit of an idol, is it never speaks to you. So you can set your own course. You can imagine it says this. Well, are you going to accept what God is saying to you, or are you going to accept what you're saying to yourself in some of these situations? 1 Kings 18:21. Elijah came near to all the people. The Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. But the people did not answer him a word. Have you ever had a situation where the Lord has been speaking in your life, and you've kind of accepted it, and then you've kind of went away from it? And you've kind of accepted it, and you've kind of run away from it. I've had situations where the Lord has at some point said, all right, kind of like, are you going to take it or not? And the thing that spoke to my heart, it really struck fear in my heart, is I had better take it. Because if I don't, he may not strive with me in that area any longer. So be very careful. If the Lord is striving with you in an area, go with God. Go with where He's talking to you about. All right, what did the Baal prophets do? So one thing we don't maybe want to do, but what did they do? It's just part of this story. Called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, "O Baal, answer us." But there was no voice. No one answered. And they leaped about the altar which they made. So for all you kids out there, you can see those Baal prophets. They're really jumping up and down. They are trying really hard to make this work. It came about noon, and Elijah mocked them. I should have really put Elijah in here somewhere, but he mocked them. Call out with a loud voice, for he is a god. Either he's occupied, aside, on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and he needs to be awakened. So they cried with a loud voice and cut themselves. They said, well, maybe if I make my life miserable for myself, maybe God will do it. And they did all kinds of things. It didn't work. No voice, nothing. So what's one of the other steps or one of the other things that Elijah did that we can do on a daily basis? Of again, we're thinking, how can we invite the presence of the Lord in our heart? It says, then Elijah said to all the people, come near to me. So all the people came near to him, and he repaired the altar of God, or the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. And the thing that the altar signifies to me, is kind of like a framework for the sacrifice to happen on. Think about it. So we have set aside a Sunday morning to come together as a church, to sing and to pray and to be together. And my prayer and my hope is that the Lord comes and visits us. That is the prayer and the hope. But why don't we just say, well, instead of setting a structure for this to happen, let's just all decide whenever we feel like coming to church, let's just kind of come. So one day Junior comes, nobody else is here. The next day John comes. Next day Mike comes. And maybe sometimes there's two families here, and sometimes one. All I'm saying is there may be a time to repair the altar of God. And although a structured time in your day does not automatically bring the presence of God, it is a mechanism for it to happen. Because you look at the other people also had an altar. So an altar doesn't guarantee success. There are other churches gathering this morning that are completely dead where the presence of God is not in. It is not a guarantee of success, but it is a welcoming place for the Lord to come to. I don't know how else to say it that way. Same thing with your day. If you set aside a time for there to be an altar there's no guarantee that the Lord will show up. But it's a welcoming factor in allowing him to come and visit you and for the fire of God to come down. So what did Elijah do? He repaired the altar that had been torn down. The next thing is Elijah took 12 stones according to the number of tribes of the sons of Jacob. We heard about that this morning and about the high priest. So he took these 12 stones and put them down. According to the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, Israel shall be your name. The Hebrew meaning of Israel is God contended. wrestled with God, triumphant with God. In Genesis 32:24-28 is one of the first times that Jacob was called Israel. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When he saw that he had not prevailed against him, he touched the socket of his thigh. So the socket of Jacob's thigh was dislocated while he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." He said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." When you set up that daily altar, again, not a guarantee, but it is a mechanism of a welcoming of God's presence in your life. When you do that, let Israel be your name. And by that I mean stand on the promises he gave you and contend with God. Contend with him. Tell him, "Lord," like Elijah did. We'll get to the prayer of Elijah later. He said, "Look, I set this up, and now we need to have this contest. Lord, please show up." You can contend with God and let your name be Israel. When you set that time aside, say, "Lord, I have made this altar, not a guarantee of your presence, but I ask you, come meet me. Come and meet me. Let your name be Israel." Contend with God like Jacob did. What is one of the other things that we can think about? So, I have mixed feelings about this one, and take it or leave it in your own way. But I'm going to share some thoughts, and then you can apply it however you wish in your life, right? There is this thing of, let's create a mood for God's presence to come in. Let's create the perfect scenario. Everything's quiet. I play the right music. No, I do that. So I'm just saying, just understand that the mood and all of those things, you can be in the chaos of New York City, where there are people all around you, there are taxis tooting, and you can pray to God, and he meets you right there in your heart. All I'm saying is the mood or the setting is probably not the most important thing. In fact, there may be some benefit to not rely on that. And why do I say this? Let's look at these next two slides. 1 Kings 18:34, and he said, "Fill 4 pitchers with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." And he said, "Do it a second time." And they did it a second time. And he said, "Do it the third time." And they did it the third time. The water flowed around the altar and also filled the trench with water. Practical application. You're a mom and you have a child screaming at you. That is like water on the sacrifice. Application. You're on the job site. The homeowner's kind of scratching his head and saying, "You didn't do that correctly." That is water on the sacrifice. And also in 18:23 it says, "Now let them give us 2 oxen, let them choose 1 ox for themselves and cut it up, place it on the wood, but put no fire under it. And I will prepare the other ox and lay it on the wood. I will not put fire under it." So there's 2 things he did here that prove that the mood and the exact setting and whatever is not important. In fact, it can be detrimental. He put water on it. To me, that tells me it's like, I don't have to be in this perfect, place in my psyche and my mind. He can come in the chaos. The other thing is, he didn't try to whip himself up with emotion. Now, when the fire of God comes, that's like emotion. Like, there will be emotion. You'll probably cry. It'll change your direction. It'll do things that are very emotional. But he didn't try to create kind of like, hey, I hope kind of when I go up to the altar, I'll kind of kick two sticks together and it'll like spark something, and I used really dry wood, and this thing's go, take off. How often do we do that? I do that. I do that. How about you say, this is probably the worst day that it could happen. I had water poured on me by all my brothers, my sisters, the people I worked for. They just poured water on the altar. And I feel very dead. I have no fire. You are a candidate. You are a complete candidate for an Elijah experience. But are you trusting in the promise? Or are you trusting in the environment? Are you trusting in the promise, or are you trusting in the environment? Doesn't matter what the environment is what I want to get out of this. So then Elijah prayed. 1 Kings 18:36 through 38. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, today let it be known that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant, and I have done all these things at your word. I think we can come to the Lord like this. Lord, I poured water on the altar. I don't feel like I have fire, but I have prepared in my heart an altar for you now. My house is a mess. My business is a mess. I just wrecked my car. But I have prepared an altar for you. Answer me, O Lord, answer me. That this people may know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you have turned your heart back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering, and the wood and the stones and the dust licked up the water that was in the trench. Notice that there's even a word of faith for the future. That the people may know that, O Lord, our God, that you have turned their heart back again. He's actually speaking of, it's like, oh my, I wouldn't want to pray that because their hearts weren't turned. What if that keeps the fire from coming? Elijah still had faith and went in bold. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood, the stones, and dust, and licked up the water that was in the trench. Remember that all that water that was dumped on, all those negative circumstances, all the times, all the things that you're like, surely God could not come today because everything went wrong and my emotions are all scattered. But you know, the fire of God, when it comes, it licks up all those negative things that have power. Basically, God can, what I'm trying to say is God can come at any time. When you prepare an altar for Him, God can come at any time. It's interesting. There are times when God acknowledged and said, there is salvation come to this house when people clean up. But in this case, cleanup did not happen until the promise was believed, until the word of faith came, until the fire came, and then the cleanup happened. How do you like those dead people? The X's over their eyes? 1 Kings 18:40, then Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal. Do not let one of them escape. So they seized them Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. Maybe sometimes the time to slew the negative things in your life is once the fire of God has come. Sometimes we're so busy slaying prophets without the presence of God. How about we go into the presence of God? Once we come out, we will be well equipped to slay all those negative things in your life. So let's just recap here and then we'll close. And there's one thing we didn't mention, so I'll read this here in 1 Kings 18:41 through 46. And Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there is the sound, roar of a heavy shower." So Ahab went up to eat and drink, but Elijah went up to the top of Carmel. And he crouched down on the earth and put his face between his knees, and he said to his servant, "Go up now, look towards the sea." So he went up and looked and said, "There is nothing." And he said, "Go back 7 times. And it came about at the 7th time that he said, "Behold, a cloud as small as a man's hand is coming up from the sea." And he said, "Go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down so the heavy shower does not stop you." In a little while the sky grew black with clouds, wind, and there was a heavy shower. The very last thing on this list says, "Look out for and allow rain to be in your life." Look out for it. It's going to come so fast, you better get on your chariot and you had better ride or run like Elijah. Because there are blessings going to come your way. When the Lord touches you and meets you, it changes everything. It just changes everything. So again, in just recapping here, when you have turned to other things and are dry, hear the promise of rain. Hear his promise. Stop holding between 2 opinions, Word or God. Then repair the altar, a framework for sacrifice. Start contending with God. Let your name be Israel. Rely on a miracle, not on the arm of flesh. When the fire falls, slay the Baal prophets. Look out for and allow the rain in your life. And remember, the sacrifice is not dependent on the time of day, having the exact right circumstance. In fact, the miracle can very well happen when there's water all over the sacrifice. God bless you, and I hope that gives you courage, and more than anything, for my own life and for yours, I am seeking the presence of God. I